celebrating the 10th year of School of Environment and Architecture. We started in 2014, and since then we have been kind of uh, doing a lot of public programs and initiating a lot of new ones. And this particular program of the Graduate Symposium is one of those. Just to give a brief background about Sea City and Sea and the cultural programming at Sea. This is the cultural programming or the intersection of the school with these kinds of discussions on architectural spatial culture is intrinsic to the education here. And we run a C conversation series that has been going on for the last 10 years, where in every semester we have fortnightly conversations with people from a variety of fields, from not only from architecture but also from allied design and culture fields. And alongside that, we also host architectural exhibitions. We invite practices to show their works and inquiries at the school. We also host sea pavilions where architects and other spatial practitioners are invited to actually experiment full scale structures and architectural ideas on campus. And over the last 5 years we have initiated something called as sea dissertation symposium, where we open up students research and design work as a public forum, to which is open to everyone from different schools and also the city at large. And Since last 3 years we have also initiated this particular forum that we have invited you for, which is called the Graduates Forum. And The idea is to invite fresh graduates who have recently finished their degrees in architecture, or 5 years of education in architecture, to give us directions in some way, or kind of sense what is happening in the space of the field that they are practicing in, and also articulate ways in which what questions are they asking today, what is the contemporary field like, and how does the field look like through their lens. This is the third cycle of that series. And so I welcome all of you and thank all of you for joining us today for this. Milind Mahale, my colleague, will be joining us in moderating this session. And uh, Before I begin this round of discussion, I want to preface the seminar today, which is titled "In Search of Practice." And it is also under the rubric of this whole annual event and the decade-long celebration that we are having, which is called "Devising Architecture Amidst Entanglements and Exigencies." And the idea of entanglement is what produced this idea of the search, because we all are actually existing in such a flux of activities where so many things are changing at such a rapid kind of pace, that before we are getting used to one thing, we have to begin to learn the new one. And these kinds of changes create a web of possibilities in which we are constantly navigating, and new hybridizations happen in this kind of space. But having said that, when we were also looking through what transformations have undergone in practice, we realized that just a few years ago there was the Supreme Court also ruled that you no longer need to have an architecture degree to be able to build a building. And in that spate of things, we also came to realize that um, architecture is produced, formal architecture is produced only by 10%, or rather not architecture, let me call it built environment, is accesses only 10% of architectural services, amongst which, if you leave out the 5 or more percentage that goes on to, those elite kind of thing, there's a very little percentage of, you know, um, uh, uh, people who are actually doing work in the public realm. Okay. And so here we are all studying this course for 5 years, which has been since last 100 years. It has not changed at all in terms of its modality of 5 years, but still doing many different things. And that's the intention, to untangle or entangle today, re-entangle today in through this discussion, that then what do we make of practice, and how do we search for practice, and what intention do we hold for practice as young practitioners of space today. So with that backgrounding, and we'll open this up more as we go deeper. I would first like to invite all of you to give your small brief introductions, and also I want to tell, for the benefit of the audience, that until last year we were inviting school graduates who have graduated from the schools of Bombay, but we are very fortunate to extend this radius to more cities this time. We have graduates from Ahmedabad, from Baroda, from Pune today joining us. So now it's slowly, this symposium is becoming a more, if I may say, national kind of discussion. So I'm very happy to receive all of you, and and hoping discussion. Would you like to start, Yash?
Hi, can you hear me? Yeah. I'm Yash Gorecha. I graduated from KRVI in 2021. And since then, I have been kind of dabbling with visual identity and space design at the company I'm working at in Worli. Yeah.
Hi, hello. I'm Tanaya. I graduated in the year 2022. I'm from Academy of Architecture, Mumbai. I practiced as an architect for almost a year and a half, and I have been taking on freelance projects as an illustrator throughout the years of practice. And right now, I am completely switching towards illustration, branding, visual communication, and forming a small studio setup. In addition to that, I also am serving as a visiting faculty at my alma mater. And yeah, that's pretty much. Hi, I'm Drashti Kanabar. I graduated from SEPT in 2022. I currently I'm working in Spasm for over a year in Bombay. And hi, can you hear me now? Hi, yeah. Hi, should I restart? Yeah. Hi, I'm Drashti Kanabar. I graduated in 2022 from SEPT. Currently, I'm working at Spasm Design in Mumbai. It's been over a year now. Uh, I am as passionate about architecture as I am about fabrics and fashion and textile design. So I have also interned with a luxury conscious designer for a couple of exhibitions in the past. My building journey actually began in fourth year when I joined a senior of mine, and we did a couple of projects in Ahmedabad itself. But yeah, currently I'm just working here in Bombay.
Hi. This is Pooja from SEDA, Navrachna University, Baroda. I'm based in Ahmedabad and currently I'm working in Sangath. I graduated last year, and so me and my friends, we started off our practice from third year onwards, where we used to take multiple interior projects, architecture and product designing projects, and from multiple cities, because we all were based from different cities. And that actually like spiked my interest for project management, because we used to also do the execution part with the designing, and like that, yes, and that's where I want to go towards. Yes.
So I'm Divya. I graduated in 2022 from NMIMS BSSA, and I went on to pursue my master's in environmental design at AA London. Um, I interned as an environmental I interned as an environmental consultant at Atelier 10, and I will be joining as a graduate now at Atelier 10. It's a very flip side to architecture, but going into like consultancy where like your clients basically become architects now. So it's like a very flip side, fast moving kind of like like a pace. And Like I worked there, and I've been freelancing doing environmental consultancy in Mumbai as well. That's also two aspects of like.
Hi, I'm Ankita, and I graduated in 2020 from C. I immediately went into teaching as a teaching associate at SEPT. And following that, I joined as an architect at Bustard Design Studio, which is where I've been for about 2.5 years now, uh, mostly doing architecture and interior projects and some amount of research with the Bustard Lab. Apart from that, I've also continued teaching this year with at BSSA for a semester recently. And other than that, there's things like uh, making jewelry or experimenting with materials, writing that I also do in my free time. So yeah.
Hi, I'm Brendan Delima. I'm from LS Reja. I'm a graduate from 22 batch, and I've worked for a year in architecture at Ratan Bartley Boy, and then I've moved on to landscape and urban design at Studio Pod. I also do some freelancing in interior works and 3D modeling. That's all.
Hello. Yeah. Hi, I'm Amay. I'm from Brick School of Architecture, Pune, and I've been working since 2 years, counting my internship and plus years where I've worked while I was in college. I've been freelancing using this software called as Unreal Engine, which is usually used for game design and usually used for other things as well in terms of configurators and space design. I've been using that software for integrating interiors and architecture together to make that as a game and to present that as a game. And I'm working. I used to work for a firm named Panchasheel, and I was freelancing for them as well and developing the system for them as well. But now I've parted ways, and I'm starting my own studio where I would be doing this thing on my own and with a team of mine. So thank
You- Thank you, thank you. So the round of introductions already shows that a lot of you have uh, already started assimilating yourself in largely luxury or visual merchandising, illustration, and game design, AI, or the digital world, and so on. And so I was just kind of wanting to initiate this discussion by asking you to reflect upon, the 5 years of training that you received in your respective schools and how it maps on to your interests and what you're doing in the field today. So would you like to reflect about things that really caught your attention in terms of the discussion around space and environment, and how you got interested into what you're doing today? So if you can trace very quickly uh, uh, that kind of journey.
Hello. Yeah. So I'm from Break again, and so 5 years of college has been a roller coaster ride, honestly. First year was more about exploration of form, material, and all kind of different organic shapes and all these things, which kind of triggered your brain into thinking outside the box. Not only that, but also making you uncomfortable. And when you get to that uncomfortable stages where you kind of flourish after that. But till that stage, you're just copying or just doing things out of your subconscious mind. So that kind of trained us to go beyond that aspect of the subconscious mind. And also, in terms of developing an interest, the faculty played a major role because the suggestions they used to give in terms of it may be as simple as just watching a movie called as Blade Runner or just watching some movie called as Interstellar. So these kind of things slowly developed into something that we kind of got molded into a certain person, I would say. And I think that was one of the aspects that I would say that shaped me as a person, because you go through your ups and downs in architecture school, and that is where you kind of decide what's working for you and what's not working for you. And I think that was one of my reasons why I kind of delved into this field. So yeah.
I think I'm from LS Raja, so I think for us it was a lot of design detailing was involved in us. So I think that also got converted into my practice, where I was able to get into the details of things and also be able to resolve it, how I was thinking about it architecturally, and also how it was going to be resolved structurally. I think my final, more than my 4 years, I think my final year, my thesis year really shaped in me into what I wanted to do in the future. So I think that that is the only project that you bring to the table yourself, and you are curating it, you are designing it. That is the only project that you initiate on your own. So I think my thesis, which was about flood resilience in Mumbai, really helped me to understand urban spaces and how the built environment and urban environment interact along with the landscape of the space. And so that helped me a lot into translating that vision and that spatial development into my practice.
Hello, it's on, right? So I was one of the first two batches here at C, and so the way that we were introduced also to like architecture was more from the point of view of kind of seeing it as a practice that is very deeply embedded on a personal level, with yourself. And so every like project was kind of an opportunity to introspect your own self and your own kind of biases and inclinations, questions. Um, and there's a very kind of research heavy process that has to go into doing something like that, right? So that's something I think I've carried from how I was taught to perceive architecture. And even if it, and then being in the commercial sector now for about 2.5 years, trying to find ways of still holding on to that ethos of looking at architecture like that. Even when you're doing like a small interior project, like how do you see interiors also like as just space and not like the you know internal decoration of an existing form. So I think those were values that uh, I picked up from my education. The other thing I think was to see your role as like a custodian of space and not as just a designer, and that can be both incredibly like a very morally heavy task because it's more to see yourself as like someone who's responsible for how space is being shaped around you. And that's something that will, I think, be a lifelong journey to unravel. But yeah, and the third thing quickly would be how to constantly position yourself socially. So not to just reduce your users as clients, but to kind of think of a larger social zone that you are affecting through your work. Um, yeah, and holding space for that. So.
So my kind of interest started with like very small subjects of like climatology and vernacular architecture, and then in my fourth year I went on to kind of go into solar decathlon India, which was like primarily based on like understanding environment, which kind of also made me understand how architecture is also connected to a lot of other like professions where you have other engineering backgrounds, how entirely a building can be kind of formulated. But more than that, I think the course and the masters as well made me also understand that architecture, like 5 years of architecture, spoke a lot about like building form and space, but it also boils down to the occupant and how the occupant feels in the space. So things like going into detail for like occupants was something that I got interested into, and that's why like the whole career tangent of shifting towards consultancy was something that I got into.
I think for KRVI, my values and learnings have kind of stemmed from the idea of making. It does not. It's not necessarily how of the architecture, but the what and the why of it. It's always been a constant sort of practice of thought as to why does this exist, who is it for, and the how part is kind of this is my opinion. I think the how part you kind of figure out in practice as you go on, but the kind of moral questions around what the building, who is it pertaining to, uh, why is it built, and if built, what kind of impact does it have on different groups of people. Again, we come from a schooling. Most of us come from a schooling that does not teach us this way of thought or an understanding of the world, that I believe KRVI gave me, that sort of a platform of understanding the world through a very different perspective, that I believe schools don't at all do in today's time. uh, some I would say. But yeah, the thought of making something, now that be like a small little puzzle to a 20-story building, the what and the whys have certainly been really important. And the how you kind of figure out along the way, that also kind of might have been a criticism for KRVI in the past years. But yeah, I think that's the thoughts and values that were kind of that I learned from my college have stem from these ideas of making something.
So for me, I think there were two strong key takeaways from the 5 years of learning architecture, and one was that design is fluid. Um I think I was exposed to a lot of these elective courses which had nothing to do with architecture, but they were just built, designed on development of a skill. Illustration being one of the electives, which is why later at this point right now I could see it as a viable career option for myself. I was introduced to that skill in second year, and then I was urged to enter into international competitions through college, and I think that sort of helped me realize that okay, I'm good at this, and if I develop this, it could do something for me. The other thing is that architecture is a collaborative practice, is what one of my mentors I remember telling me. And design is also collaborative. It extends to that because we used to have these studios in college where we used to take a design, and there were first you go through your process of designing something, and then you figure out how to actually hypothetically make it or build it as a tangible form. So for that, we used to literally practice in a way that okay, we would have a CTS consultant, which is a construction technology, or you would go to somebody, your faculty who's teaching you services or HVAC. So for me, I always saw in a way that an architect alone will not be able to uh, build something without the help, and it's okay to have the help and guidance of those who have um, been in the industry for that long. So this extended to the practice also, where I decided to sort of understand that there are some things which I will never know without an experience, and I'm too naive at this age. And it so I can rely on collaborations for that. So yeah, that helped a lot. So coming from SEPT, I think the one thing I was most grateful for is I had the freedom to focus on what I liked, and to keep choosing to learn about that. So we have the vertical studio system, wherein we were given a choice to choose a particular studio out of a varied range of multiple studios. Some focused on visualization, some on spatial organization, or some just on material exploration. So it wasn't a fixed syllabus. We could design our own syllabus, as in if we wanted to go for detail oriented studios, we could keep choosing the same thing again and again. Or if we wanted to go for visualizations, we could choose the same or similar studios time and again. And I think that was a result of the result of that was that a lot of us extrapolated the traditional architecture discipline and went into the different emerging disciplines that even the 60% of the people that are sitting here are focusing on currently. The second thing, for personally for me, which was really helpful, was I think not not just choosing what I wanted to do, but also the way I thought about or came to that point. So I think we were given more attention towards the circular motion of thought rather than the linear straight motion that you have to analyze a site or a context first and then go into conceptualization and then go into evolution of design. No one there had ever questioned me whether I can design a railing first on the day that I had gotten the site, or choosing to change my larger idea after midsem or after the jury. So that was something which was very critical in also choosing the kind of practice I wanted to go for or work for in the coming years. A practice that would allow me to draw and communicate through those kind of thought processes and not work in a linear way. And I think that, and I think lastly, it would be something that you don't, I mean, it's great that if you learn good from good, but you also learn good about good from bad. So the kind of environment or the atmosphere SEPT had created or the campus life had created, it was something that was really I was grateful for the 5 years, but didn't really want it for my professional life, working through the night or getting just stuck on passionate architecture per se, or something along those lines. So choosing a practice that allowed me to be free about, like, okay, I can work just 10 to 7 and still produce the kind of design and details that I would want to do. It's not that I can only do that working through the night or just like that. So something like that, yeah.
So when I chose that I want to do architecture, like, and I told my relatives and friends that it's a 5-year course, everybody had this question that are you doing an MBBS or a doctorate course or something, because nobody was aware that architecture is like a 5-year course. But once I have been through that process, I feel that those 5 years has been really important to me because it helped me grow as a person. It helped me open new perspectives and also uh, like discover certain interests which I never knew that I had. So, like as I like in my college from SEDA Navrachna, like like in multiple studios, we always they always taught us to focus on the process more than the end product. Like similar to few of your cases where like we used and that's what we were trained to do, like following the process, where how like first setting out your design intent, then coming up with a design position of how you want to build it, and then coming up with different design strategies where there are different possibilities of the design, and then the final product. So this process is something that has stuck with me till now, and I feel that I have like consciously unconsciously I have been using that process even in my practices where I'm doing certain freelance projects or something, where I always like tend to go with that process, and that has helped me improve my working style. And also my college has also exposed me to multiple RSPs, and even my research thesis where I got to explore multiple communities in different places, and that's where like I understood the close relationship like between land, resource, climate, and people, and how context is like very like in a region like India where every region has its own unique features and own unique architecture practices. This is what started intriguing me, and like that's what I intend to do. I want to understand different communities, how do they work in a specific region, and then build as per them. Learning and learning continues. It's a learning process throughout a lifestyle. I feel, yeah.
No, I just means all of you said about like, how your institute has given you this, so to say, niche where you are doing your practice. But I was just wondering, all of you were staying or living in the same city where you graduated, and or you changed the city to do the, sorry. same. So all of them say stay in the same city. And then my question would be, do you think the city has a city politics or a city economics has a something a bigger role to play what you want to choose? As in all Mumbai people seems to go away from the architecture because I don't think there so much of the architecture now left in the to do as a practice. And then Pune, maybe with the IT thing coming, you start getting into gaming design. I'm just trying to correlate the things. And what do you think about this? These things, which I think why I'm asking you now is that after 2 years, you know these things. In institute, you might not know that evidently, but now you can relate to these things. So I just wanted to, what's your thought about this aspect?
So one thing I understand from this is that, like a question, that whether it matters or not, whether you've graduated from the same city and whether how you're choosing your field according to your city, right? Is that's the line that we're kind of choosing, right?
It's the other way around, I guess. What I'm saying is, do you know consciously that the city is making you to take a decision, or do you think, or rather, a question could be, did you ever think that I want to change the city so I can practice in a certain way? That can be another question. But or
Okay,
otherwise, you know
got it.
that the city is actually influencing your practice in a certain way.
The city, I would say, like since I've started doing my own thing, and before I started doing my own thing when I was doing a job, I realized that the architectural firms that are out there, the practices that are out there, they're already so established in their own ways, and the practices that they're doing, they're so established. If you go through Instagram, if you go through any platform, there are so many interior works going on, there are so many architectural works going on. So it kind of intimidates you in terms of understanding, like, how would I stand into this market if I start on my own? How would I differentiate from the usual crowd out there who's been doing this since 15, 20, 30 years? And how do I offer a different service, or how do I stand out? It's not even a question of that. How do I stand out? Because it goes more on the lines of me proving to the market that what I would want to give, rather than me getting satisfied in what I'm doing. So I had to draw a conclusion in terms of, one, what would be good for the market, and one, what second is what would be good for me as well, what would I enjoy doing as well. So I had to do that kind of an exercise with myself, where I had to understand what I like to do and how I would be different in the market and how I would offer something different. So that drove me to the practice that I'm currently planning to do right now. And I think that's the direction I would want to take. So I think that's my driving factor. But otherwise, answering your question, yes, I think the city also plays an important role in determining what you would do, because it's like the subconscious thought inside of you of कि ये मेरे से नहीं हो पाएगा तो मेरे से हो पाएगा, kind of a thing. So I think that would be one of the reasons why.
So I think being a Mumbaikar, I think all of us have experienced the rains of Mumbai. So I think that drove me into a different type of practice also, because Mumbai is already so built, and I think I wanted to go away from that and see how unbuilt it can be. And so that, I think, was a really driving factor for me. I think everyone remembers the 2005 floods and how it stopped the city, it brought the city to a halt. And I think how we analyzed it, and we realized that a lot of the build factor was one of the main reason why Mumbai flooded. And I think that's also informed my decision a lot. I think traveling during the June to September is always a nightmare, and it's how we're going to get through these rains and all of this. And it just not affects the high class, but also affects the lower class a lot, where these slum dwellers are living, and these lower high density, low form buildings are there, get completely flooded. And when you think about these spaces and how they interact with the environment, or rather how they can be unbuilt and still able to occupy these millions of people that live in Mumbai, I think informed my decision a lot into how I got into the practice of urban design and landscape. Also, like I think there are so many spaces in between these liminal spaces in Mumbai that call out to you, and like there is very little public space. But I realized that Mumbaikars really use those limited public spaces in a very extraordinary way. So there is a small talao at Bandra station, and there are children playing in that talao, even if it's not very clean or something. So I realized that Mumbai wants public spaces and it requires public spaces, but we do not have as much public space, so we're not catering to these public spaces as much. So I think that has gotten me into this practice of developing spatially in a different way.
Just to add to it, to candidly speak on this topic, there is a certain degree of intimidation from the state and the way it functions. Having lived in Bombay and driving through Bombay, there's always a fear, even if you've done nothing wrong. There's always a fear of the police, or there's a sense of surveillance you feel, or like an intimidation, and that I don't think that made me take a conscious decision on if I would want to practice in that certain realm or not. Just an interesting story. In last year, there was the AD project that we did with Rahul Gore and Jignesh Doshi was on the lines of the metro projects, how the metro stations are designed. We took up the entire line 2B from DN Nagar to Mandala, and we kind of each team designed one entire station, and the learnings from it were really fruitful to understand the kind of economics or the kind of technicalities and legalities that you have to deal with when you work with someone like BMC who and MCGM and all these kind of authorities who function in the city. um, and there is again a sort of intimidation that I felt from a lot of from my colleagues who would want to function in the space of public design, public urban spaces and designing for them. Uh, but I think to answer your question, there are lots of people who take a conscious decision on not doing it because of the politics of it or the corruption of it. And I have also been fortunate enough to have some conversations with people who work in the BMC, in the CM's office, and they themselves are very kind of have a what do you say, a very dystopic kind of not optimistic view on certain ways the politics function in the city. So many real estate projects, it's very, there's always a commercial aspect to these things, like it or not. But I think, yeah, I mean, there's coastal road and all these kind of conversations happening. There's definitely a sort of intimidation when people want to practice in the upper realm.
But I mean, just to kind of frame it in his question, that does the experience of intimidation make you stay in the city, or would it want you to explore another space for practice? Is probably what his question was. So yeah, you can think on it and we can listen from others. What he's trying to ask is that does the experience and the knowledge of that experience of a particular city make you think about your practice in a particular way? You may not have made this connection before, but now that we are, he has opened it. Do you think that there is any linkage between what you've chosen to do, and it may not, it may not like be like we often get into this, standard mode of like. How does a question occur to us naturally, um, and then how does it, um, what is that word called, how does it grow into a practice? So does this, has your respective cities given you any intimate innate experience which you thought architecture could, or your architectural training could become a potent way to give direction to? Just kind of trying to narrow it so that we don't sway.
I think I've had an experience working in two cities, and very two different cities being like. So when I was doing consultancy like in London, it's very different compared to doing consultancy in Mumbai. People are like very aware and like very up for doing something or doing any kind of gestures, be it even like if it has cost implications. But to do something here, you have to show people that like there is some cost aspect that might benefit you in some way. So the same knowledge, same data, but in two cities, one being people are very aware of things and one where it's driven very cost or very like political or regulation aspect of it. So like while you do practices in two cities, you have to keep that in mind as to how you portray that same knowledge or same data that you have in two different cities basically, or two different cultures or two different people basically. So I think it is very necessary, or city does play a vital role in like how you deal with the same practice or same knowledge. I think in Mumbai per se, when I was doing freelancing, it's very difficult to convince people to do something environmentally. Like it's very hard to say that you change these things which will benefit you somewhere down the line. Like you invest in something which will show you some benefit 5 years down the line. People are not going to understand that in Mumbai, because for them it boils down to saying that there is an investment that's coming right now compared to something that's benefiting you 5 years down the line. But um, people in UK basically are trying to understand something where it's going to pay back in the future, it's going to benefit the environment. People don't think about it. I see that in maybe 5 years or 10 years down the line, it might come where people are also going to like um, get aware, or the government itself, like in the UK right now, partially people are aware, but partially people also have to do it because the regulations ask for it. So in Mumbai, if there are targets that are set and it comes down to regulations, people will have to follow it, and like there will be awareness that is created because of that aspect.
So I have a slightly different tangent.
Hello.
Yeah. So, especially after deciding to take the course leaning towards the illustration and the graphic side, I came to realize this happened when I was actually hunting for opportunities as a graphic designer, and I kind of like on the standing of my architectural education, and I realized that the opportunities in Bangalore right now are more over there. So in that aspect, yes, I think a city does play a vital role. However, something which is a sort of a recent discovery is that, especially after during the pandemic, there are so many, and in the field of graphics and visual communication, there's so many international or global companies that are hiring remotely and that do have a different time zones and they operate on that. So for me now, I still have a reach to global clients or to clients across. And for me, the definition of a city itself is not valid anymore, because I can work from my area and I still will practice, continue to practice whatever I will still offer that, and I will still use the architectural background as my base for education. So in that way, I think pandemic has helped destroyed the, like it has blurred boundaries to a certain extent. So yeah, a slightly different experience. Yes, yes, homogenize the experience. Yes.
Uh, Slight like coming from a different city, based in since I'm based in Ahmedabad, I feel that it was this city that helped me decide that I want to do architecture, because like when as a child, whenever I used to visit certain places like even NID or SEPT, or like I was very fascinated by the architecture and the environment that it provided me. And that was one of the first influence that okay, I like that made me more sure that I want to do architecture. And yes, like of course, in practice, it is intimidating with so many, like with regulations and so many competitions around. Specifically in Ahmedabad, there's a lot of competition because there's so many people practicing already, and they already have a base set up. But at the same time, I also like what is still keeping us going, I feel, is because of the community there, because I feel there's a strong architecture community in Ahmedabad where there are a lot of like events or talks which help us get out of that reality and get come back to the like architecture, where we can talk about architecture and show our love or talk about its theory, have multiple conversations. So that is something that is sustaining me as of now, and I feel that the city has an influence for me.
Hello. I think like the question is really interesting because I've been thinking about this a lot lately. In the sense that if you're working in Bombay and you join a commercial practice after graduating, there's always this saying that will get thrown around, which is if you want to make money, even the bare minimum, you have to do interiors, and like, and that is a there's a deep rooted problem in that also, because you're already segregating in your head key interiors is separate from architecture, and you have to look down on it for some reason. You know, there's this thing that's prevalent in the practice. But all architecture firms in Bombay, there'll be their Instagram pages might have second homes and larger scale buildings, but the larger portfolio is still interiors. So I think that is something that you have to kind of just navigate that space, that yes, like most of your clients will be people who can afford to hire you, and that's also funny because we're so horribly underpaid. So even affordance is like very skewed that way. But if I have to think of like, and I still continued to practice here, but that was a personal choice based on my circumstances. I know a lot of people who got really saturated by that extremely fast commercial driven environment and decided to move to like a second tier city where you might get opportunities to practice larger buildings or institutional work or public work, for example. And there's also a bias towards that, right? In school, we are largely doing projects that have that institutional ethos. So you want to also, you have an aspiration to practice that when you're out of the field. But in Bombay, it's really difficult. The only way to do it is if you're a corporate who's doing some kind of privatized, like an Ambani sort of a situation, or you work with the BMC through like collectives, which is something that Banda collectives done in the past. And that is also really complex because it's not like the design process is completely based off of BOQ. You get a tender, first you have to fight for that tender, which is itself a very corrupt, process. So if I want to practice like public urban design, any of that is in addition to what I'm doing, I have to figure my way out inside that network first. After I figure out a network, even like then to have the kind of vision of how do you execute a BOQ which just has these many tiles and these many like concrete and steel as the three materials to be used, and that is what you have to use to make a nice public space. That also is something that is very, I think, unique to Bombay, because informality is normalized here, right? Informality is how most of the city is built, and that will show in our BOQs also. So that is also something that I've learned, like is very specific to the experience of Mumbai. And the third thing that I, again, completely not related things, but just the third thing that I've learned from how growing up in Bombay, studying in Bombay, the kind of projects we did in Bombay has shaped my approach to just space. Is always not just space, like life is just to think very incrementally, because that's how you can do anything in Bombay, right? There's no space to like do big moves. You have to do small moves, small moves. There's repair, layering, fixing, and all of that. So that's how I've also learned to treat everything else in life. on an introspective level.
I
Yeah.
think just to add to what Ankita just said about being able to intervene in the public realm, one also unfortunately come from a place of power to be able to make decisions or provide solutions to the state like that, and that's where the kind of commercial state doing something aspect comes into play.
Yeah, I mean, it's lovely that you all actually, when you were speaking, can we increase the volume of this mic? I really have to shout even at this. Yeah. Um, uh, that the interesting values of these cities that you brought out, and I just want to sharpen the idea of practice because a lot of us uh, um, doppelgang practice as professional practice. But the idea of discussing practice in the graduates forum is to think of inquiries and how inquiries become our long questions for, so not necessarily something that earns us food, but something that earns us intellectual satisfaction. So I want to kind of understand from you all that you know how do you like you all have definitely started or identified certain thing that will probably sell you for your financial requirements, and you've identified your respective skills, which can really get you, and it will, like, you will burn out after some time, because how much of it will you do? And that is when you will arrive at your question of practice, which I want you all to kind of reflect on, that in doing this we subconsciously know that um, there is something else going on, which is actually the practice. um, you know for example, your love of seeing the city and these forms, it comes in a very very primordial kind of way, uh, like something that is in the belly and brewing like a burp, uh, or someone said here about the incremental dimension of how, I mean, probably what the architectural education does is it just reveals to you that, oh, it was this, and then you want to play with that dimension, and you realize and you start seeing your own life and things that are happening in your life through that uh, lens. And that is where I think the question of practice often situates or embeds itself. So I want to again pass on the mic to open this up more, and we can think along together that are there these things, because we are talking about the search of practice, and then what can it become towards again redirecting what you're anyways doing in making things meaningful for yourself.
So I this thought actually came when I was talking about this very thing where I said about architecture shaping my life in a way. And at the end of college, when the graduation ceremony was there, I realized, was it the shape that was given to me, my identity, or is it something else? Because like you said, that it might be something else, but we might just be picking the wrong, probably the wrong point or the wrong thing, and just telling ourselves that, okay, this is the way I have to go. And there has been a constant question whether I should do this, or like whether this is my identity. And a lot of times we make certain decisions in this architectural career that I've been in. A lot of decisions come out of the necessity for money. Well, that is one. Second is for the aspect of whether it being cool or not. Or third, it might be whether it's good for me or not, whether I enjoy doing this thing or not. But I realized, like midway only, like while doing these things, or when I tried other things, maybe graphic design also I've tried something on the lines of urban landscaping and all these things, and a lot of other things I've tried to dabble my hand to just find that kick where I'm getting satisfied, not for the money, not for anything else, but for myself. And I think it's going to be a constant journey. It's not going to be a question that gets answered very early in this life, especially this early in life, because you need to keep on, I think, hitting that spot of asking yourself whether this thing is really working out for me or not. And sometimes what might happen is sometimes you might develop the skills, and in the pursuit of developing the skills, you might lose interest, you might burn out. And I've burned out several times to reach this space, and I think I might burn out more to reach somewhere else. But I think that burnout is essential for you to figure out what you actually want to do and what you actually would like to kind of pursue. Because, like you said, after 5 years, I realized this is not for me. Architecture is not for me. It's not working out for me. And even if I have okay grades, good grades, it's not working out for me. So what's the point of spending 5 years on this? But again, it's not that you wasted those 5 years. That certain thing definitely shapes you into something else that you've already intended to go towards. So I think that is one of the points.
Yeah, no, just to kind of, be on the same page. I didn't mean to say like, uh, it's not about doing architecture and realizing that this was not for me. See, all professions say that the whole world is their profession, which means musicians say that all world is music, architects say that all world is everything is architecture, everything is music, everything is medicine, everything is, you pick up any discipline, and they all like to say that, and that is interesting because it gives a worldview. What I meant to ask was, um, uh, that what are these latent questions that architecture or any kind of education allows you to surface those. And it may not be architecture, but in some sense the tools of architecture allow you to surface them. What I was just asking that, so uh, yeah yeah.
I think um, like the question has really made me think through angles that I may have been thinking subconsciously. Like what Rupali also said a while back was that it's not just the built room that is architecture, or the teachings are not just the programs of the space or like the walls that we build, but it's rather the larger understanding of making something. You know, when you say that, I really have been thinking about this a lot, about what I'm doing right now and how does that kind of muddle into architecture as a practice. And this is something that I think and kind of has been the philosophy of the way I am thinking of what my idea of practice will be, or my own practice will be, is that I feel there is a certain kind of a voice one needs in terms of what they design, what they make, what they intend to do. Uh, and I think to figure that out, I think everyone here is trying to, in some sense, do that. You know, it may seem that there are different job titles other than junior architect, project architect, but I feel that everyone's trying to kind of muddle these ways and find their voices in some sense in the idea of practice. And when I think of that, like, just to give an example to a reference point, what I'm trying to say is like how OMA has AMO as a kind of secondary practice of their own, where they indulge with fashion, or like, you know, the book, if you see, where Rem Koolhaas and Bruce Mau collaborated to making the SML XL. There's a very different style, or a sense of voice. I don't want to use the word style, but a different kind of a voice that they have when they communicate anything, theories or buildings or any kind of environment. Recently, they designed like this ramp walk, like a fashion kind of a space, AMO design. And that is something that I envision in finding for myself, as when you ask that these ideas of practice, how are they going to merge with this idea of architecture, or you know, how they tend to kind of crossroads. And I think that's a journey that in some sense everyone's here trying to find. um, yeah, I think the first question also really brought out this idea, what Rupali was mentioning, and it's really, I never thought about it like that, but it's something very interesting. But yeah, that's the answer to that.
Before I get into your question, I'm just thinking out loud here. Like, I do see that, I mean, there is a huge change in digitalization that has happened, you know, in the just last year also, with AGI coming, you know, developing so quickly, and Mid Journey and all of these tools coming up, I do feel like it's there is of course an economic component to wanting to use your these other skills we gain in architecture school, and then make extensions of practice out of it, whether it's graphic design or illustration, all of these things that we do have trysts with in school. And then there's also personal interest, right? Someone might be inclined to game design, or someone might be inclined to brand identity or visual communication. So there's both of those, like the economic and personal aspect. But I also feel like it's the systemic change as well, that we are starting to see space as being proliferated from space itself. Like there is a digital space now, there is people are starting to give more you know importance to how things are branded, marketed. Even spaces like restaurants today are more about how the visual aesthetics come together for a photograph. So we're designing from like inside a phone outward, rather than that just being incidental to the process of design. You don't we didn't like in school, you don't think ki, acha, it has to look pretty, that's why I'm designing it a certain way. Some schools, yes, but not like I think most of the ones we're here for. So I think it's not just like a personal journey thing, it's also we are hyper medialized ourselves, and so that is also pushing us to kind of think of, yeah, the environment of a game is as legitimate a space as like me walking down a pathway in the real world, because people are spending that much time in a game now. So yeah, that was one response, as what might be like kind of an added inspiration to go into those tracks. Um, on your question, I'll come back. I'll let people respond.
Hello. Yeah. A small input on what both of them said, that like I want to give an analogy of a compass and a map. So where like a compass gives you a direction, whereas a map is very set out path that you have to do these steps. But in a world of uncertainty, and when the world is growing in certain ways, we cannot just follow a map. It does change. So I feel that having a clear objective where we have a specific direction that we go to, that is how we should go about it, and that will help us achieve what we want to. So, and everybody has their own personal inclinations as to what objective they have towards practice. And
Yeah,
yeah,
there's no absolutist way
yes,
of functioning
yes.
in the practice. This is very interesting. Just to add to this idea of muddling these ideas together. Uh, in Jodhpur, I had seen this stepwell in the middle of a city. It's a 280-year-old stepwell. It wasn't really accessible, or more something that is seen from the outside. Right now is a fantastic public space. Does anyone know the magazine called Motherland? They're really coming up with these kind of fun tone of voice in the way they are making these magazines. The magazine company and Jodhpur Urban Regeneration Project, those guys came together and revamped the entire stepwell. The tank has water in it, and if you see the entire stretch of the road, uh, these buildings have been how do I say, not necessarily the facade hasn't changed in any sense, but like the way certain kind of signages are put, or the certain kind of shops that are opened, or they have a certain sense of an identity of their own. There it's not so much so as an architectural intervention, but the result of it is a fantastic public realm. uh, but like the cafes that opened around it, and the kind of colors that are put on signages, or something like the facades of the building, it's very cohesive. You walk through it, acha, I'm in this place which has some sense of intrinsic value of heritage, and is very much like a contemporary space now. And I think that's where I see this mix of someone who's not from an architectural background, how they've funded this entire project to create something so fantastic. And my time there, the first person I talked to in the city was a planning student, He came up to me and he asked me all these study trip questions like, do you like this? Do you like that? And then he asked me, since he was a planning student, it's a very important questions. Was it difficult for you to reach here? Not something that we think about, but some may think about it. It's something very relevant. How what the signage is very apt. What the roadways, how you reach there, were very apt. And I think it was only that particular area that was done by these Jodhpur urban regeneration project people that done it really well. And that was where I saw this kind of a mix of, yes, it comes from a different space which has this sort of architectural impact in the way people perceive the public space or experience the public space.
I thought about the question you'd asked actually, and I again, thought about what it could have actually meant. Like the way Rupali Mamet said before, like we're sitting over here, how I might be into game design and architecture, everybody else might be into illustration or urban design, but everything is again still, does come under the bracket of architecture, but how we have disassociated ourselves from that thing and we are kind of feeling guilty about it or thinking we have gone out of it. But again, if you think that what is the definition of an architect in that way, it's like if you can envision something, you can create it. So thinking on those lines, I would say I think creation is that innate desire of doing this thing. You can create anything. I can create a game, I can create an interior design, I can create an urban design, anything. But I think everybody over here who kind of thinks in that way of, as an architect, you can, like Mehmet said, it really had a impact in that just 2 minutes. What Mehmet said, it really kind of moved me in that way that it can be anything, creation of anything. And that's why I think we all are in this field where somebody likes to sketch, somebody likes to do some material exploration, but at the end of the day, it's again creation. I think creation is what we might enjoy. Actually, I was also looking at, like, jobs also, like a few months ago, online. So I just typed architect and I was getting these results of project architect, ARS architect, Infosys. I'm like, does Infosys really hire architects? But then the architect over there meant something else. The architect over there mean, like, project architect, like, into coding and all those things. But again, why do these people call them call them architects? Because I think they have a vision and they can create something. So I think that boils down to that.
I think just coming back to the question of like this in search of practice or coming from a very personal experience, or maybe I think we have fourth and fifth year students around us who are doing thesis. I think coming from thesis and coming into practice, the transition, I think most of our thesis projects have a very strong backing of, us wanting to be a socially responsible citizen, trying to make a difference in the public realm, or something which has a very strong social backing to it, or a social reason for building something or just designing something. I think that is when also you're starting to going into practice and developing your own philosophical or ethical standpoint. The line between whether I want to earn money, whether I want to do it for just the passion, or whether setting up a practice, it's a way you have to make the most dreadful choices, whether design or management, or personal ethics or prescribed ethics, or just safety or innovation, something along those lines. So personally for me, I had also dabbled into fashion. So just talking about the three, roti kapda makan, I've worked with kapda and makan, and I've worked with people who have been unapologetically catering to the top 10% in those fields, coming from a luxury conscious designer, fashion designer, or the practice I'm currently engaged with, building second homes, private homes, catering to the top 10%. And coming from that thesis or the social view, am I really doing what I really want? Or, what am I even doing? What am I even designing for? Do I really want to design for just the elite? But I think where all of these came from was everyone has a different timeline to what they want to focus on. I personally wanted to focus on learning how to design well, or how some certain beautiful details that you see around are actually built. Like even
from your studios or whatever, I think I had a really strong sense of how I wanted to draw something. I might not know that if I need a 12 plywood or a 19 plywood to make this design, but I know what I wanted to design. So coming I think in just getting all this together, what kind of practice you want to do or what kind of practice I wanted to do, I had come up with like a thing that I wanted to set up an office that would creatively grow, conceptually, creatively, and economically grow. Because even though we say that there in the in this economy you can't really be environmentally sustainable as well as economically sustainable. The kind of clothes that I was or wanting to buy, it was something that I had to save up for over a period of month, or the kind of architecture I would want for myself. If I were to commission it to an architect that I really liked, I had to have the certain kind of capital to gain it. So like in this economy, the line between like economic sustainability and the environment is just too far apart. So unless the economy changes, it's okay to choose one at a given point in time in your life and then move on to the next. I think something you said before also, that it's okay to earn money, but then what do you do after that money? So I think I am at the point in my life where I want to learn how to design well, maybe, and then earn and then see how I can do with what I can do with that money for the larger public. I may be catering to just the top 5% currently, but I do want to cater to the 95% the same way I would cater to the 5%. So learning how to do that probably.
Thank you for articulating it so well. um, I will slowly open this discussion to the public. And we already have a question from one of our students from Facebook Live or huh? YouTube. One of our uh, graduates, Vikram Veeravalli, and he's. I'll just pose this question because probably it will just fit in. Uh, he says, I have a question. In school, we have always had a common umbrella that connected us as people and also guided our thoughts, either as an overarching concept or syllabus requirements, etc. After leaving this umbrella, I'm sure each of the graduates would have researched and tried to pursue people and practices that have a similar train of thought, matching their inner voice. Have any of you found this connection already, or are you still searching? Do you think you feel more connected to all new emerging practitioners around the world, regardless of similarity, or do you feel disconnected and separated, unable to place yourself in this network? And which is in some sense loosely connected to what I was asking about. You know. One is the whole thing of mapping what we have learned to what is happening in the field today, and other is also this inner calling which you were trying to articulate very. I mean, I really appreciate that you were able to put it that way. So any reflections and response to the inner voice, that, or are you forcing your 5 years onto onto your the field and the compulsion exigencies of the field, so to say? Ankita.
Hello. Yeah. I think like to directly answer the question of inner voice. Um, Firstly, I think it's very difficult to articulate what your inner voice is when you've graduated, because you've pretty much just soaked. I mean, you can hear it in our answers also. Now, there's like a common like appreciation for how we were taught and the values and this socialist kind of framework within which we're placing ourselves. So I think it's still, I'm 3 years into the field now, and it's only now that I'm able to articulate why I made certain decisions after graduation. So, for example, graduating in the middle of COVID and also doing a thesis that was about public space and gender and all of that, the complex kind of urban environment, seeing how like closed off the world became during the pandemic and having to reconcile that with what I was making on paper on an imaginary project was something that made me feel like I'm feeling too unsafe to enter practice right now. Now again, that can be opened up like in a whole other conversation, but which is why I think stumbling upon the studio that I worked with at SEPT at the time, which was again critiquing architectural practice. Unsafe in the sense, I think like you do the internship before the thesis, right? So you know the field. If you were to join like a name droppable architect's office, you know the work that is happening. You know your position in that hierarchy as well. It's a very pyramidical system in most offices. So the design work that trickles into the intern's lap or the junior architect's lap is very limited, and it's extremely like polarized, um, indignified also in many ways, in the sense of the exploitation that happens in that level. So knowing that, I think the discomfort was that am I ready in the middle of the pandemic to jump into that, because I will have to make my peace with that struggle for the few years. Apart from that, it was also knowing that I will be diving deep into hardcore commercial practice because I wanted to, not like there are definitely other ways of practicing architecture that you can do, but that's what I wanted to test out. So doing like a TA ship, uh, which is, you're teaching for a pay, is an interesting like in between which happened for me. And thankfully the subject we were also studying in that TA ship was architectural practice, critiquing architectural practice, trying to kind of really unwrap what is happening in India at the time. And that also prepared me mentally for, okay, what are the different kinds of things that are actually happening right now, apart from hardcore commercial practice. And then having that kind of awareness, interacting with like 20 plus offices through that coursework. And also, an important thing we did in the coursework was to develop your practice through an ideology first. So if you're, the hypothetical project that was given to the students was you pick an ideological position for yourself, something that really matters to you, and you imagine a pseudo practice that would be shaped around it. And this is a really difficult thing to do, and it's easy to do in academics because you're imagining without any liabilities, any money needed. And the kind of practices that the students came up with were incredible. Like someone decided feminism is important to them and gender is important to them. So how do you, create a feminist practice of architecture? How would the employment ratio work? How would the division of power work? And how, what kind of projects would you want if you're a practice like that? And how do you get it? So those questions are asked first, and then you start your practice, which is a very different way to how most of us are able to do it, pertaining to capitalism. So for me, that was a nice kind of in between. And then finding my inner voice being like, okay, I'm interested in how can I make a difference in the commercial space, which to me was bus ride, because they were kind of in very humorous ways trying to challenge the status quo, even though our clients are largely the lower bracket of status quo. So yeah, that I think that has been an interesting process of finding my inner voice. And now to reach a stagnation and burnout, that has prompted me to think of design as beyond the commercial practice, and then making my way ahead.
I think capitalism does impact, like it or not, it does impact a lot of the way lots of our thoughts are shaped, or lots of practices are shaped in today's time. Like a bunch of my friends who are practicing like proper, like hardcore architecture, just a funny quote they throw around. It does not reflect on what their ideologies are or anything, but like good design is always synonymous to a good budget. That's what is kind of a sad state of things on lots of these name droppable places. um, but again, I also understand. No. Not necessarily that, but sometimes it does mean like you would be able to buy a certain kind of a material or like certain kind of just a simple lamp. I was seeing this really interesting space that was designed, and there was a nice lamp in the middle. I said, "Wow, I really like this lamp. What a design!" And I see look it up, and it's like 2,30,000, and that was the highlight of the image. And that's when it kind of like you realize that there is a commercial aspect to it, which does give them a certain degree of success. And you know, there's good ways of looking at it as well, that I kind of experienced very recently, as a there's this school, the Oval School in Ratnavati Girls School in Rajasthan, in Jaisalmer, the one that is, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for mentioning. It's just that I have had been thinking about it during that time. Is it okay if I kind of go on? Yeah. Uh, so it's again, to be candid, I thought it's a vanity project. I thought that cha, this is one of those, the fancy architects have designed this nice desert ke andar building, and might be deserted also, not many things. To my surprise, there were people. There were 60. Again, Sabya Sachi has designed their uniforms. That's a very, again, everything about it was name droppable. But again, having been there, talked to people, spent time just in and out of the building, uh, there is a degree of doing good. It's one of those projects, remove all the names from it, one of those projects that a thesis student would want to do. One of those projects where you actually would want to create something in the middle of a desert where kids travel 20 kilometers to come there. There's no settlements living around it, nothing at all. It's just barren cactuses and sand. That's it. That's all that is around it. And outside that, there's a small hut where they prepare food, roti, and sabji for the small kids. At the moment, there are first to fifth year, fifth standard girls who study there for free. Absolutely, food, education provided for free. And why does that happen is because of these big names behind it, like Infosys and all these people that are behind it, who kind of give them the funding to do these, give them the funding to execute certain projects like that. And that's when my kind of apprehension on both sides, I'm trying to understand, after actually being there, I'm trying to look at it from both angles, that there is a certain doing good willingness of people that exist. um, and again, if you were to remove the commercial aspect from it totally, something like, say, something fantastic like Jawahar Kala Kendra, that was again a state sponsored building, fantastic space, but I doubt that would happen in today's time so easily. But yeah, that's kind of it, just to talk on the idea of commercial aspects, how that affects certain kind of decisions of how a practice is run in today's time.
Thank you. I wanted to attempt answering the question of finding the inner voice. Frankly, because I have been struggling a lot between. I thought that I had to pick sides of either being an architect or being a non-architect and practicing as a just a designer. And it's very funny because even, and to answer the question that came up on the YouTube comment, yes, there is a certain sense of disconnect that I still feel today, because when if I were to go to pitch to some client, and if I were to introduce myself to them as an architect, and if I am pitching for something which is visual communication or branding, then I often get asked the question, oh, but you are an architect, so then um, how do you relate to this? And at that point, it makes me think again of all the things which are common, which is why between the fields of design, which is why I started saying that one of the most important things that architecture has taught me is that design is fluid, and that principles of design apply everywhere. And I think that disconnect is inevitable, and one just has to go along with the flow to find, like, I think the brief sums it up really well. The brief for the discussion today, that feeling lost equals new ways of practice, inventing new ways of practice, which means that if you're not lost in the first place, you will not search for a way to sustain yourself economically, sustain yourself by finding your inner voice or that satisfaction.
How Yash pointed out about capitalism, and you pointed about ideologies people have. Like I feel that yes, these factors do affect like our practice eventually, but also the society, how, like, what is accepted in the society, what are different opinions people have about building certain things, and what is considered important, what is not considered important to be built. Like even these factors, I feel like do come into play when we are designing something, because I'm sure that if suppose we are designing something, many people will have opinions on it, and like there will be points where even I felt like let down about the opinions, but eventually when I started reflecting more upon it, I realized that like those opinions helped me make my intent, like my inner voice, more stronger, because I was able to make, like, produce arguments related to why I built that, and that is something like that is something that I feel will be built over time. So the idea of ideology when you're starting your own practice, I feel that that is something that is something that will be built over time, where you'll be more strong. Like that will help you make you more confident that yes, this is your ideology, this is why you're building it, and this is your opinion. That's what you want to show to the people. So yes, that's what I.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for this. I think this discussion has gone to capitalist and commercial, and I guess before we say that this is the culprit that doesn't allow us to do a lot of things, I would like to. Means it's good that you are thinking about it now, and it's generally this tends to get into that, but I think it's also has a lot of possibility to think in the other ways. So just the whole idea of the discussion is not to come to maybe conclusion, but to think through all of this as a question of your practice. Now I want to just ask something very different question, that how do you see your friendships which you have developed in the, let's say, 5 years of your architecture course is helping you to decide about your practices? Like, is there a friend who is telling you to do something or not, or is there a friend who is trying to resonate with your idea and take something to do something, or now you are all alone, like no more friends is helping you to discuss your ideas after 2 or 3 years of a practice?
So I think I just came back from London like a week back, and I was sitting across with my friends, and like most of them are like into architecture but still doing like different things. Like someone's working under real estate, someone's doing mainstream architecture, someone's doing photography, someone's like into their own practices, like their families have practices. But like when you discuss things or like ideas with people, they also somewhere at the back end think about like that idea that you portray to someone, how are they kind of, or how can they try and implement that in their practice, where like someone working in real estate talking to me where I'm a consultant might think that how a consultant would help in their practice. And I think that's how like talking or sharing ideas might also create opportunities within friends. Or like I think I have friends who like approach their own classmates for things. Like I have someone who does architectural photography, and someone who has their own practice, where people, when they share ideas or share their passions, kind of try and collaborate within that community or like known set of people. So I think that friendship in that architecture and like talking about ideas from time to time might help also to create opportunities within like the community that you know, which is quite important, I think.
Hello. Um, Nice question because I feel like for me personally, there was an experience of like isolation when I joined the field, mainly because it's a very demanding kind of practice, right? You get very embedded in the practice day in, day night. You have to manage like, teams of 100 people on site day in, day night. So it can be a very um, isolating kind of a thing. And I'm noticing now that there is a trend after 2 or 3 years of my close friends also coming back and from the same kind of isolation, coming together and discussing more often what our existentialisms are and how they cross, paths. Like there will be like a common experience of purpose, like how do you find purpose and how do you cross brace your purposes. Like if I have the skills of writing and another person has the skills of kind of getting research grants, for example, like how do we come together and propose something that we're both very passionate about, or we're feeling really disconnected from society at large, so we go and volunteer together, you know um, at a collective of women who are making sewing fabrics, and spend time with them and do work with them. So I feel like the friendships have now really opened up the idea of alternative practice for me, because the way we're also, I think the baggage of that star architect and hero architect, savior architect, all that in your head, no matter how aware you are of, that's not how like you should be shaping the world now in today's context, because you exist, like you can't shy away from capitalism. I'm sorry, matlab, it's easier to imagine end of civilization than to imagine end of capitalism. So within that context, now I feel like our generation is able to really tap into the friendships and say that no, why should this be traditional architecture? Why should I, if I want to make a high rise, why should I only be at Hafiz, And those kinds of questions are coming up, and we're trying to figure out ways. And the I think for me the ideal case scenario would be 5 years from now I'm sharing a cooperative co-owned studio model.
But I just want to kind of push it sharply. Um like sometimes during our time, at least we thought that our friends understood us better. So when they would find something appropriate, they would think of us and they would say, I know something that you will really like. And do you have those kinds of friends? And if they are, then what are they telling you? And what kind of triggers that those things give you about yourself and insights about yourself?
Yeah, sorry, I'm just taking up the mics.
Thing that I was happily teaching at academy, and my friend was working at Charles Correa's office, and he was shutting down his practice, and he needed an archivist. And this friend of mine knew that I was very meticulous in keeping things, so he said, "Ki Anuj, I think I have something for you, and you should definitely come here." And I said, I can't leave my job. So he said, okay, I'll make some arrangement for you to come here part time. And that's how I got an archivist job. But that's when I realized that I loved handling material so much. And that was innate to my practice of thinking about things. So I'm trying to push this thing that how do you talk, what things do you talk to your friends, what do your friends come and tell about you that you probably might not have realized about yourself?
I have a friend who's kind of like a music producer, and not this time. It's not about the travels. Don't worry. Um, I have a friend who is kind of a music producer, uses a lot of instruments and everything. So sometimes he makes something and then he kind of, asks me that, what do you think? And how do you kind of, what do you think of when you listen to it like that? So I think that's where the diversion kind of happens, where I am able to give some sense of critique to him that no, if you do it like this, it may sound a little more classical or like that, and that's when my dilemma also, like certain things, like again, this is one of the questions that I've been thinking of, about the idea of the old and the new, and the way he's trying to merge it, and all these ideas that come together. So that's where I kind of am able to give him some sort of a critique on that, and that's a totally different kind of an art form, but I do have some sense of understanding of how.
Opinions are fine. We all give opinions and
Right.
crits to each other, but I'm just trying to ask if there's a practice dimension that your friend
Hmm.
helps you realize, and uh, you know uh, uh, and in the manner of how he's asking of collaborations and sharing these ways of thinking about the world. And in this in while you are responding, I would finally open it up to the audience and prepare your questions if you have any for everyone here, and maybe we can take 2 or 3 questions from the audience and take this discussion to conclusion. Yeah. Any of you who would want to talk about friendships? Yes.
So not friends, I would say. Well, I was displaying my thesis work in college. So Ratan Batli boy, who had come, he was going through the thesis and he was going through the work of the college. He realized that they were also working in a sustainable practice called Eden, which deals in a lot of different works. And one of them was reverse, which deal with rivers, but it is spelled RIVERSE, trying to reverse the situation of what the reverse is. And then he reached out to me saying, can we work together in a collaborative state? And you have this interest in rivers of Mumbai. We can work together. We can do research. We can do a lot of things that help us both eat out and also cater to the environment, cater to the city. So I think that not through friends, but maybe through even practitioners or seniors that have gotten great opportunities to get involved in what I'm interested in. So I think that is a different sort of approach to it. Also, like me, there are also people who are my friends who have joined like wayfinding and signage. So we also, through my firm, I was involved in wayfinding and signage. And when I showed her my approach, she had a very different approach. He like, why do you have to give direction to people? Why can't they get lost a little bit through the wayfinding and signage? So I think like we having these discussions with people uh, about the different career paths also, and also like how they would have done it differently is also, I think, opens you up to a different question. Can this be done in a particular way, or does it have a particular way, in fact? So I think that is an interesting approach.
Yeah. So
So I was very blessed to have really good friends, even in school and college, especially in college in context of architecture, where like it was back in 2020 during COVID, where like it was the four of us who thought of starting an Instagram page where we just put out our work, and then eventually, and all of us were from different cities. So like eventually, like one of us got a project, some interior project, and then as a collaboration, we started working on it, and eventually we started getting more projects. And I feel like it was very new for us start collaborating and working on projects that were remote initially, because we were doing all the discussions were remote, but wherever the project was in whatever city, the person who belongs to the city, they used to execute it. So many things were very new for us, and like throughout the process I feel that like it's the best way to go about if you're doing it with friends, because they know you the most, where you are the best at, where you lack the most. Of course, we have had many arguments, we have fought on many stages of the project, lot of things, but in the end we always used to have a discussion where we used to give critiques, okay, this is what we should have done, and so that we don't repeat it again and again. So I feel that this process was very helpful for me personally, for my personal growth, because this helped me push my boundaries, which I wouldn't have done if I would be doing this individually. And of course, we get a lot of opinions and discussions, and that is one more thing that helped me during this collaboration work. So,
I would like to take questions from the audience now. If anyone wants to. Yes.
Huh? Yeah, yeah. I'm Prasad Khanolkar. I teach here at C. I had a question about the sources for practice in the sense that maybe when we were studying in early 2000. So you look at books and you see, studio setups and these big offices, and that is what you aspire for, and that doesn't really work out. I mean, not, like it's hard to set up those kind of large architectural practices, right? Like the Charles Korea and Bava and those kind of offices. Uh, but what are the kind of sources that you look for when you're thinking about practice, right? Which is now you can't set up those kinds of architecture practices or offices, or is that what you aspire to do? Or are you looking for like these look at other kinds of sources in the sense of other kinds of practices that seems to resonate, that this is possible, that architectural practice doesn't have to be these old school kind of offices, but there are other sources for thinking about practice. So what are these other sources that you've come across, or that you sort of think about when you think about your own practice, not working as a part of someone's practice, but trying to think about your own architecture practice?
Where do you look for? While you're thinking, if anyone has any other question, I can do that, right?
Uh, Hello, hi. Uh, I think I'll. Oh, sorry. Hi, I'm Rachit. I'm a final year student at C itself. My first question is very much related to what Prasad asked, where, uh, I mean, with with all the discussions, I, it's very evident that the capitalistic devil have has pushed you all away from space design almost, where there is a strong understanding of space that you have all grasped and soaked in your 5 years, but now you have moved towards, because of the economic disparity and everything, you have moved towards it. So uh, that sources question also, pushes towards it. You must have other practices of yourself. As Anuj mentions, archiving as one of them. So can do those also factor into your inner voice, or whatever it was that pushes you towards developing a practice, or a long durée thing that you have for yourself? Because, and the other way that I wanted to frame it was, borrowing from the theme of the entire 10-year event, was the idea of fabulations, where, if I was to if I was to ask you to think of a world where you remove the entire economic disparity, an idealistic world where capitalism doesn't exist, and then what would your long durée practice be? What would your existence, what would your purpose, or all the big terms we threw around in this discussion, what would that be? What would your long durée practice be, considering economic disparity is not there? We are not, building roti or stitching kapda for the makan or whatever. But yeah, what does that happen then?
I think I'll attempt to answer. Uh, the question, I think Instagram, if used appropriately, is a great source. Uh, and it has actually, for many firms, it has become a great visual portfolio of sorts. And there are many, this is a recent learning, that there are many firms who are putting their work out there, who are doing it on collective platforms. So
Yeah.
in that case, I would look up to studios which are multidisciplinary, who are practicing uh, uh, there are studios that I have been following who are doing architecture along with branding, along with illustration, along with fashion technology. So firms who have sort of branched out into different avenues and seeing that they are able to continue a language, a common language which they're using as a fundamental, for example, a principle of design. They are able to translate that in architecture, they're able to translate that while branding, they're able to translate that into fashion that they're creating. So such sources, multidisciplinary sources for me. And I think to answer his question, if yes, if the entire if we take the economics away from it, I would still incline a little bit more towards graphics and illustration. I think that has also been possible through the journey of architecture, so I will not negate that, because I was introduced to this through my in my second year. And I am at today, till date, I'm equally passionate about architecture as much as I'm passionate about this. It's just that there's this inner, like you mentioned, the inner voice. There's this sense of freedom or this flexibility that I find when I'm making something for a brand versus when I'm making a tangible form for a client. That sort of is the decision needle that shifts me towards this.
Do you want to try framing what the practice is then? I mean, what do you want to do as a practice become? I mean, from what I get, I mean, it's related to the visual cultures, but when you say branding, it's a very particular form that we are speaking of. What does the practice become then?
So, honestly, very honestly speaking, for the last couple of months, we've been thinking, my colleague and I have been thinking about this question a lot. What exactly are we, and what exactly should, like, if we have a studio or if we have a firm, then what exactly is it that we do? Who exactly are we? Are we architects who are practicing illustrations, or are we architects who are practicing graphic
No, 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 no,
design?
no, no,
Or
no. That's not his question, and
oh,
neither his question, and that's
oh,
why
sorry,
I
sorry.
dropped the
Sure.
disclaimer that we are not talking of practice in the professional practice terms. We are not talking or defining, asking you to define practice in terms of how you position yourself in the market.
Okay.
We are using the term practice as something that that we really are curious about, to think, do, or experiment. Okay, and we may not necessarily have all the tools, but architecture gives us some kind of orientation. It may not also. Okay, but inherently, because we have done a 5-year course, we tend to explore that curiosity through the tools we have access to through architecture. Okay, so it's not the question that of interdisciplinarity, because we do not believe in these kind of silos
Okay.
like we were discussing earlier, right? So we are asking about that curiosity, that it's not about branding. It's about why, because you might identify something that does not require branding at all. The question is somewhere else, right? So how do you address that thing? Understanding. So all of you, and also to say that capitalism was once the ideal and is the ideal for one society. So there's no such this thing, one versus the other. But most of us are constantly kind of getting back at uh, a market definition of practice. And we are the question what Prasad was also asking is that, are there any people who inspire you to think of mixing up skills in a certain way, um, that you uh, n- that arrive at a particular kind of result which you are interested in? Huh? Sorry, he's busy. So yeah, I mean, keep that in the mind, because we are not talking about professional practice, but we are talking of curiosities about the world. And what practice does it take? It may need to invent a practice, okay? And that's where his question of fabulations is, that if imagine yourself in a world where you don't have any of these exigencies of politics, networks, what will be the fabulation of that practice, and what would you like to do, right? Yeah.
So one thing that I was talking about was about how I delved into Unreal Engine and game design and how I tried to relate that with architecture. The reasons were again the same reasons why you scraped those things out to again fit into those brackets of catering to the market and all these things. But scrapping that thing out, I would honestly go for virtual film production or um, film sets which are made virtually, or like making a film house or a film studio, let's say, or something on those lines, where I would actually not care about such things and actually be excited to do certain things without any considerations of all the things that you've scraped out. So I would go for something like that.
Often in responding to such questions, you don't need to have a label to that practice कि मुझे, हाँ वही तो चालू होता है ना क्वेश्चन का रिस्पॉन्स, कि that's where is the search, because it is not formed yet. And so you have certain things and you have a hazy picture out there, and you are developing a way of articulating, maneuvering, deviating, devising, getting lost and getting there. So that's what we are actually asking you. So I'm glad that you are able to reach at that point. Yeah, anyone else wants to respond to that question? Yeah.
So I think for sources, I wouldn't look to any particular way, but I would say I would love to deal with water as an asset rather than looking at it as just a resource. But so, like how Mumbai can, or any city which is flood prone, or how can we use it as an asset? How we can live with water and not fight against it. So I look to like different places like Netherlands, what China is doing maybe, and trying to formulate what can be done as a city, and how water can be used, and how it can serve as well. And I think that has really led to interesting thoughts with me. So also, like, there's an interesting thing that I've come up with. There is, so AI, I was like recently going through it, and AI is basically trained on like different practices. Like it studies different how a flood prone city would look like. It is trained to visualize. So I just wanted to see how my thoughts and AI, which has basically studied all of this, how our thoughts would differ. And I realized that our thoughts are very different. And I thought, like, even if it is vague, my thoughts, but it is completely different about how people are thinking currently in this situation. And I think that might be a good thing as well, of how we could look at things very through a different lens.
So it's not a question, it's not an articulated question, but I'm just thinking from how you guys spoke of, like you immediately started with Instagram, and I think there was also a little bit of a gap in understanding maybe the other questions. But in between all of this, I was thinking that what are the cultural influences that make you think of your practice? In what particular ways? I mean, you may choose to respond because some of you had touched upon this a little while back, knowingly, unknowingly, but you have spoken about it. Like, and what kind of new, say, introductions to this culture? Introduction, not in very formal sense that okay, Nani, I want to do this, uh, but how would you want to practice what you like, and what kind of cultures would those bring? Or are you currently engaged in any of these, say, discussions within friends or within your current work environment that gives you that kind of an opportunity, or are you kind of having that right now? Or are you kind of shifting? Even like it's not like a very big change, so it's not like a very big difference from what is currently happening, but these are very minor things which culturally sort of take shape. Like the big office that he spoke of, it got influenced through a certain practice, a certain huh? No, no, like Charles Correa's or some big practices from earlier, yeah, the like Hafiz's or so that was one of the ambitions. No? Right now, also like we was just talking about the Generation Z, or wherever you belong or you feel belonged. What are the aspirations there, and what kind of cultures are coming in through those aspirations or through those kind of cultural influences, or what you consume in terms of media or reading or content otherwise. So that's where I think that's where the question of this new form of the practice or the office or any kind of say collaborative sort of remains. So that's where I think the discussion may be.
Prasad, do you want to place your question so that?
No, I was thinking who brought in that inner voice question. It was not. It was Vikram. No, Vikram. It sounds like Man Ki Baat type of question. No, it's like. No, I just asking. No, it's quite interesting. Like I had a friend recently who visited, not from India, and on the same day, on 22nd January, he was in Bombay with me, and he had a very interesting point to make. He said that this new temple that is being built. Um, why is there no architectural experiment in that? It's a you build a temple in this time in this place. What are the architects of this country doing? Are they not talking about this temple at all? It's like a very seemingly apolitical question, but also a loaded kind of a thing. And I found myself very tongue-tied in this. I wanted you all to respond. What would you responded to this person?
I think the patriotism was too much because I think there was some old fellow. I'm really sorry, I don't remember the name. It was some old fellow who had envisaged this kind of design back in 1930s, and they just wanted to put that only and nothing else. They didn't look anywhere else apparently. Sorry. Yeah, I'm not sure. There was some one guy behind it. I'm trying to understand.
I'm not entirely sure, but I think it's a generational firm, Sampura Architects, that have done it, and their grandson was actually my student at BSSA. So that was a funny thing because in the context of this temple being built, the project that the student came up to me with was, I want to build something for the Hindus um, in Thane because I feel like they need it. Completely like very blanket statement that comes on the first day of a design module. But yeah, and that also makes me relate to your question a little bit because there is an imagination of one, what is it that people need in this country right now, and who are the people who need it. There is also, I think, this kind of hardcore inferiority complex for some reason that drives this revival conversation, ki certain kinds of symbols need to be revived, certain kind of stylistic choices need to be revived, and you'll see that then like how, just again a vague comparison, but how Pavai was built with certain Greek and Roman stylism. Yeah, it was criticized. That's a different thing. Yeah, and I mean, I think the fear of speaking might be more. uh,
The
I
fear
also
of
think
voicing your opinion towards something that's so politically charged.
even beyond that, like even if we are people who in a say protected room can like with like-minded people can have a conversation, I don't think we can articulate
But how is your generation not able to devise ways of talking to power?
Instagram.
Yeah, no, but that is the platform. I'm saying that your generation has very beautiful and lovely ways of placing your opinion in the most gentle way, you know. Uh, but that's the whole point, right? But we don't see anything from you all as architecture community, young architecture community coming. Is and that's what also ties to the question of culture that Dushyant was trying to elaborate that and what you responded that uh, do you have a grip of this what is happening around us and therefore what practices might be required to intervene, interrogate, uh, or trouble some of these silences that are settling in.
Yeah. So in terms of practice, do you mean like the way that it was practiced before, like in terms of firms, architectural firms before back in the day, and what change would we like to bring in that, or like is it something related to this, the question, or like is it something else in this? Yeah.
No.
Okay. Okay. It evolves, yeah. So in terms of today's generation, how evolve, like how should it? Okay. How are we evolving in terms of this? Okay, so I think in terms of how we are evolving, I would speak for myself is that staying at one place for a long time, I think it was about survival before, and like right now, I think most of us like we kind of have that survival net, so we would like to explore and we would like to kind of, see how our interests get catered to in a firm. But again, I'm seeing this thing that practices which are pretty old and which are pretty established, we are not able to fit into that bracket because again, like you said, that you get a smaller chunk of the work that you have to do, and when you're not satisfied with that, you leave the job. And what I see with my friends also, a lot of my colleagues also, is that
It is not a survival question.
no, I mean, I'm just saying in terms of general thing that people
Yeah,
are
but
leaving
it's
the
not
jobs
a,
pretty
it's a
fast.
specific question
Okay.
again, which is framed in the frame of how you are keeping abreast with contemporary culture and what design and your practice
Hmm.
can offer or the way it can plug in to talk to this contemporary culture. So there is one level of politics which she brought about, which is in some sense harvested from the politics of design, and there is one more level to it of what that how that politics of design speak to the politics of contemporary culture. Okay, and that is something where your practice probably needs to be articulated. uh, so it's not about framing it in the bracket of market, but we are probably asking, I mean, all of these questions are probably trying to ask that what is are you, like, I love the phrase that Mark Twain uses, no, looking at the world through half closed eyes, you know. And when you look at the world through half closed eyes, what image do you see? That is your vision of probably culture, at least. And then you begin to navigate on that kind of horizon of what, where do you want to, like you use the metaphor of the compass. I really like that, that where do you then align your compass in that space, it's like literally in the middle of the sea, and you are trying to find your direction through some references which are there available, right? So it's basically about that how are you keeping, like, what kind of things are affecting you apart from your own thing. And so is there any other question that yeah, hi, Pranav. Pranay.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Pranay. And I mean, I have two questions. I mean, one is, I mean, the other factors that are involved in kind of shaping up the practice. For instance, I want to wake up in the morning and open my laptop and look at the mountains and not see kind of I don't want anyone to tell me what to do, maybe. And I mean, there are other factors as well that goes on. And then maybe I would look at also things that will allow me to do that, like maybe digital nomadism in some sense. Maybe architecture won't allow me to do what I want to do. It's also, I guess, the practice goes into somewhere designing or shaping the kind of life you want. So that's one. And second, I mean, on these topics of capitalism, culture, and whatever, I mean, the contemporary that we have been talking about. One is, I mean, what are we defining good design as? Because I saw a few definitions of what good design is. For me, I'm a product designer, and I kind of define a wonderful, beautiful design that will make my client a multimillionaire. I mean, a millionaire. I mean, it will bring in businesses, it will bring in users, it will, I mean, or is good design making kind of something in Rajasthan that will, like, like help the poor? Or is good design something that will kind of challenge an ontological question? It might not have any users or kind of visitors or anything, but it's a very simple thing which is documented, and it's kind of challenging a way of thinking. And yeah, and maybe good design is supporting capitalism. So yeah, these two. Yeah, first is not a question, I guess.
But I wish you developed on that first thing which you said, that getting up every day, looking at the mountain through the screen, which can be a practice. Like that became a practice, no, during COVID. Literally, like one person did that whole thing of recording 10-minute videos of people from across the world, which can become your screensaver. It's a practice. I mean, practice of allowing you to peep in Skype or our, all these Zoom became a big thing, and now it has literally replaced so many of these spaces, right? So that is what we mean by practice. What is it that you want to experience in the world in the future, right? And how do you strategize that? Uh, Through whatever, and someone in the conversation said that you can find your skills anywhere, but how are you thinking about the world and the experience of the world? And that's where the search begins, the search of practice begins, right? So I think we have rambled a lot. And if there are no more questions, I would like to really thank all of you for participating. And I'm sure that I've noted down a lot of beautiful things that you have said. And I also hope that you are opening up your search a little more, like stretching the search to look for new and innovative ways in which we'll begin to practice. Find sometimes it happens like it requires a long shadow for understanding your height. So I'm sure that you all will wait for that shadow to happen. And thank you all for joining. We have a very dense exhibition that is going on, which archives the 10 years of the work at sea. So I would really invite you to spend some time there. Our students have also organized a feast after, after in some time. So please join us for that. And tomorrow we have a very interesting roundtable conversation amongst architects on the subject of commoning architecture. So if you are able to, join us, please do. I'm saying if for the participant, not for you all. Okay. And we also have a kind of international conference on the subject of devising architecture amidst these kinds of entanglements, ideas of practice on Saturday at the Anabhav Sathe Auditorium in Bhaikala in Bombay. So if the people who have come from outside decided to be here until the weekend, please join us. And once again, thank you so much for everyone. I want to thank Yash and Urmi, wherever you are. Ha, for getting all of us together and doing all the running around behind the graduate symposium. So Thank you all once again.